Hello, everyone. My name is Mark Agers, and I'm the director of the Institute for Child Development and Family Relations at Cal State San Bernardino. We provide resources to families and parents in the inland region. I want to thank all of you for joining us today. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. David Chavez, who is a professor of psychology at CSUSB and teaches a variety of graduate courses in clinical counseling psychology, including a course on family therapy. David and his students engage in community-based participatory research, partnering with Boys and Girls Club of Valencia Vista, a public housing complex in San Bernardino, and Rainbow Pride Youth Alliance, serving queer youth in the San Bernardino community. David is the current director of the Clinical Counseling Psychology Graduate Program, leading to marriage and family licensure, and also runs a parent support group for the parents of LGBTQ plus children. So with that, welcome to you all. Thank you for coming. I'll turn it over to David.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you all for coming. As Dr. Agers just said, my name is David Chavez. I'm from the Department of Psychology, and I'm taking a deep breath myself. I think that's always a good strategy when we're going to be talking about issues related to coping with family tension in general, but also here we are, a couple of days away from Thanksgiving. And as always, that heralds the other holidays that soon arrive. And so this is a time where oftentimes we are challenged to kind of deal with some of the issues that we often deal with within our family over the holidays. So today I'm going to, and again, I've designed this to be brief. I'm looking forward to questions and answers. We're going to focus on issues that I think are common during the holidays, and also some possible steps towards solutions, I think. I think there are a lot of things that we can do to diminish the likelihood that we will engage in some of these tensions, and also ways to try and be prepared in healthy ways to deal with the tensions. But I'm going to also say that while I have expertise working with families, I'm a member of a family, and I got to say that there are times family tension, and that these are things that we all need to keep working on. So, and certainly I'm no person who experiences that as well. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so again, if this was if we were engaged face to face, I'd be asking you as a group, what are some of the common issues that families struggle with over the holidays? Because if you're like me, you know what those are already. And I think that I've kind of broken this down into two separate areas. There are those things that are kind of pre-holiday as we think about the holidays, and then there are the things that happen on that day themselves. So I think that prior to the holiday, we start to focus on issues like, who, at least in many families, when we talk about partner relationships, whose family are we going to be with this year? That's an ongoing issue. And again, some families have that down, and whether it's kind of mutual decision or someone has kind of asserted dominance about this issue, those are issues that sometimes people struggle with on a yearly basis. Who do we invite? If we're hosting the invitation, if we're hosting the meal, if we're hosting the holiday, we often, there's some automatics. I think that we invite family. But sometimes there are family, for example, hypothetically, I might have a brother that I really struggle with. And do we invite that person or not? And sometimes, I might be the person who's less inclined to invite my brother. And my partner might be more likely to say, that's family, we invite them. Or it can go the opposite way, obviously. We can struggle to invite in-laws, or we can struggle because there's a family friend who just automatically always comes, doesn't need an invite. We've said that at some point, but now we sort of would like to be able to have the freedom to invite them or not invite them. And yet, here they come every time. So that's a challenge. I think this particular year, we're struggling with the fact that, do we even celebrate this holiday with others? And again, we might have very different ideas about whether or not we do so. I think that for many people, I'll just speak for ourselves. My wife and I have a family of 7 children. We're a blended family, and we have a good fortune, and hopefully some have added to the fortune by working hard to make sure that we have a set of children that really do well with each other and do well with us. And so it's always a nice time. Most of the kids are local, not all of them. It's always been sad that there's a few people who live in Virginia or Northern California or Oklahoma who aren't with us. But this year, Jeannie and I will be alone, and we've made that decision. And I think our children have largely supported that. But we also invite my dad, those hypothetical brothers I was talking about, and so my brother-in-law and his family. So there are lots of people we have, and it's going to be a difficult time. We might have different opinions about that. It's possible that, and in fact, there are some differences of opinion about whether or not people across multiple households should be getting together. So those are things that we're contending with right now. And I think it's something that we all are contending with as families, not just our households, but our larger families. And it's a challenge this year. I think on the day of the holiday, and I'm thinking about Thanksgiving right now. So I called it during the meal, but obviously it's more than just the meal. But there are some classic things that I think we struggle with. And in some ways they're stereotypes. And yet in other ways, I think they can be things that people are challenged by. Whether or not, to have a family prayer. And then that seems to me more often, because I think there are many ways we can work with that. That seems these days one of the less contentious issues, because there's politics. And here we are, hopefully at a place where we're finally putting the election behind us. But for some people, it's not done. And so there are oftentimes differences of opinions about politics that we contend with. So those are the common cliche things. If I asked, I'm pretty confident I would have got people talking about those sorts of issues. But the other thing that I think that we struggle with is something that I have described as ancient unresolved disagreements. And again, these sometimes are the things that we struggle with within our families of origin. So we may be in a place in our lives where we don't see our family members quite as often. But it's amazing the sorts of things that, again, speaking from personal perspective, that myself and my 2 younger brothers maybe contended with, and maybe were challenged to kind of resolve and perhaps never resolve as kids, seem to be with us over time. And so that we find ourselves back into a place where I'm 12 and I got a 9-year-old and do the math, 5-year-old brother. And sometimes I feel like we act at those ages because there are things that we just seem to pick up, like we didn't leave them behind us. I wanted to say 20, 30 years ago, but it's been a little bit longer. I think it's been more like, 35 years since I was 12. But, in general, I think those are things that we have to think about and contend with. And again, while I've really focused on, perhaps I've projected my own family stuff, I think we can have those long time unresolved disagreements with in-laws, with others that we may have. And it's amazing sometimes how it seems like we're just ready to have those kind of points of contention on those days. So I'm going to focus again on what are some things that we can do to approach this time in a healthier way. And I think, again, it's helpful. Here we are 2 days before Thanksgiving. So I'm not going to say it's too late, because I think there's lots of things that we can focus on and talk about. But I think we have to recognize that there's some things that we really should be spending some time talking to our partners with, talking with our family if necessary, to try and to reduce the likelihood that we have these family tensions that arise at this time. I think in general, some of the things that I'm suggesting are things that we can and should do more often than just on a yearly basis during a particular holiday. So I think those are things that we can look for any times we recognize that there are family tensions. I think that one of the things that's important is we need to have conversations. I'll call them in a little bit active dialogue with the people who we may have some disagreement with. And again, I'm couching this because so many of us may find that holidays might be a time where disagreements we have with our partner that, again, can be very long-standing, are things that we may have to contend with. And so, first of all, just finding good times to have discussions about the issues of concern. So again, if we have a long kind of relationship with our partner or with our siblings or with our children, that we know from our past history what are good times. For us, at the end of the day, we're exhausted. We kind of are in different places. I'm probably still working. My wife Jeannie is kind of shutting down for the day, I think. Our best time to have conversations, really important conversations, deep conversations, connecting conversations, but also conversations related to struggling with some issue, is in the morning. We spend time in the morning just talking on a regular basis. I think it's really helpful for me to know that there's something that I want to bring up, that's a good time for us. But I think it's important to also recognize that just because I know from history that this is a good time for us to talk, that I might really want to kind of invite the other and ask them whether this is a good time for them to talk. So again, we may have some time and I may say, I'm going to do it. I'm going to bite the bullet. We're going to have this conversation, but it may not be a good time for my partner. And oftentimes when my partner is interested in having a conversation, I may have other things on my mind. And it's not really a good time for me to talk as well. Now, it's important for us not to defer or delay this conversation forever. So we need to perhaps ask if it's a good time to talk and feel comfortable and free and committed to saying, right now is not a good time, but I think I'll be done with this and have some time at such and such. Or I'm struggling with this stuff going on right now in my day. And I really can't stay focused here. Can we check in with each other at a later time? So again, it's really important that we not just say, it's not a good time, it's not a good time, it's not a good time, but find times that are good when we know that our partner has something they want to say, or that our sibling, or that, whoever it is that we're thinking about and struggling with. And I think most importantly, and this is hard, I think, for all of us, is to remember that this is a time to have a discussion, not an argument. Most often, when we recognize that we have something that we need to air, we need to bring up, we tend to have arguments. And I think we're all guilty of this. And I think it's important for us to think about ways in which we can do this in a constructive fashion and not do this in a way that is just an argument waiting to happen. And so often for all of us, or for many of us, I'd be willing to bet for all of us, we often anticipate in particular with really difficult things, including things here at the holidays, that this is going to be an argument. And we have a perspective. We're not just interested in listening, we're interested in winning. And you listen differently if you plan on winning versus whether you plan on having discussion and trying to figure out if you can come to some agreeable solution. So I'm going to encourage that we focus on active listening rather than listening to argue. And those really are two different things. And so in active listening, our job is really to hear the other, to really hear what they have to say, to reflect upon. I'll probably should just throw up my other bullets because I'll be touching on a lot of these issues, to make sure that we have it right before we then speak. I kind of like the idea that in general, we speak less and we listen more when we're having these sorts of challenges and struggles with each other. So I'm changing the language a little bit here just to call it an active dialogue. I think active dialogues obviously should include active listening, but they also include, I think, intentional speaking in a way that is less inflammatory. So I think it's important to first, again, especially if I'm the person who wants to present an idea, and I anticipate that we may struggle with this, is to state your thoughts briefly. And also to own that these are your thoughts. This is not fact, this is not reality. Now, again, those are challenges, because I think when we think something, we truly do most often think that it is fact, it is reality. And yet, I think what I'm often reminded of as I work with people who are maybe struggling with each other is everyone has their own perspective about things. Everyone has a piece of the reality, or there may be a reality. And then there's our responses, our thoughts related to that reality. So that's all I can own. That's all I can really see, is that subjective experience of reality. And again, I think sometimes in having these active dialogues, we might learn that the ways that we see the world fit, but if they're related to other factors as well, and that if we can just kind of find places that we can agree, that we may be able to move forward. So once we've, again, briefly, sometimes a challenge for me, shared our own thoughts, we want to invite the other to share their thoughts. I think, again, this invitation to, what do you think about what I've just said, or what's your perspective about this particular issue? Hopefully lets the other know that you're really interested in what they have to say, but also helps you to recognize that I'm asking someone. So I should sit back and listen a little bit. I want to hear this. And again, it's just a way of kind of framing this so that it's less contentious, hopefully. We should kind of make it our goal to listen openly without judgment. And again, it's easy to say all these things. It's not so easy to say them, but it's much easier to say them and think them than it is to actually do them. And so partly I think it's being more intentional about what we plan to do. It's about being able to let go and being able to recognize that we've had this conversation 30,000 times before this. But today I'm going to listen to this conversation, and I'm going to not let the past experience or influence what I'm experiencing right now. I'm going to listen to my partner here. I'm going to hear what their perspective is. And I'm going to do a few more things before I then launch into my next point. So I think it's helpful to then reflect back what it is that you heard. And I'll say to you that when we're struggling, that this is something that I need to work on, that I oftentimes think I heard something, but too often it's that the 30,000 times in the past, or maybe my relationship with my very cliche, but very real for me, my mother, or something along those lines, and that I need to make sure that I'm focused on this. And so reflecting back and saying, here's what I thought I heard you say, is a way of getting kind of anchored in this reality right here. It's also a way, again, and I think, by the way, this is not a one-person process. This is a two-person process. And it takes time and effort. But recognizing that your partner is also committed to this process is really helpful, because their job is to not say, there you go again, but to say, that's not what I said. Here's what I meant. And then maybe having an interesting conversation about why it is I heard what I heard. That perhaps we can shelve for another moment, but I think it's important as well. Make sure you ask open-ended questions to further understand. Again, don't ask questions like, as I'm always telling my students, ask open-ended questions. Don't ask questions that the answer is yes or no to, because that kind of closes down this discussion. Ask things that, can you share more about that point that you made? Or can you tell me a little bit about why you feel, et cetera? Now I use words I've heard that you shouldn't use why, et cetera. But if you say it in a way that's not attacking, I think it's okay to say those things. do you agree or disagree that, my whoever should come? It's probably not a way of getting this going as an open-ended discussion. Ask the person how they feel about what it is. So you're asking about their thoughts, but you want to ask them how's this going for you? What does it feel like? And again, it's easy to get kind of derailed here, but I think it's important for us to truly hear what the feeling state is for the person we're talking to. In general, I suggest that we look for common ground, that we look for compromise, for shared commitment. So, and I think I'm going to say this later, but it just kind of strikes me that whether this is someone that I chose to spend my life with, or whether this is my the family I was a family member in the family that I was born into, I'm committed to these people. I made this active choice to be with this person. I made this active choice to have a relationship with this person that I really didn't have much choice about. And so when I recognize that, then I can kind of remember that I have a shared commitment not to win this argument, but to find a place where we can exist well together, that we can do this in a way that brings us together as opposed to just permits us to coexist. So I'm going to move on. And again, I'll be happy to answer questions about this. And I'll say that it's easy to talk about these things. It's harder to do. So we all have to practice these things. I guess I'm going to say that to the extent that you find that this is something that you want to do, to use this as an opportunity to practice. You may not get it right 100%, but keep practicing. And over time, I think you'll find that by the time we're struggling with COVID 25 or whatever it is, you'll have it down. Okay, so on the day of the event, there are some things that you want to do. I think, again, we may find ourselves recognizing that there's going to be some family tension. That, whatever wonderful, magical things that David Chavez guy said to do, it didn't quite work. So here we are again in the same situation that we typically are. Again, enter it in a different place. Center yourself, kind of find the things that help you to be the best you, essentially. I'm going to say, and Jeannie often says, partly it's her way of kind of teasing about kind of the stress she experiences at family times, and the kids are used to hearing her say, the reason for the season. And most often she's talking about Christmas. I stole that a little bit. The reason for the season, if we think about Thanksgiving, if we're people who celebrate Thanksgiving, is one of gratitude. And I think that fits really nicely for here, right now at this time of Thanksgiving. It's been a difficult year for all of us. And I think that there are lots of things we can be annoyed about, but I think that we have to recognize that there's always something that we can feel gratitude about with regard to every day. There's evidence to support that people who engage in gratitude practices on a regular basis tend to be happier, more resilient, more optimistic, etc., than those who don't take that opportunity. Here's a special occasion that is really designed, in addition to the gorging that a lot of us, myself included, do at this time. That it's time to be grateful for what it is that we've accomplished. And even in this difficult year, we can do that. If I enter into this day of being with family, some of whom I'm going to struggle with, that if I come in from a place of gratitude, that I think it reduces the likelihood of family tension occurring. It certainly reduces my likelihood of adding to the family tension, I think. Remind yourself of the many points of love and caring you share with these people. If you are a person who struggles, doing a little research for this, I saw things about toxic families, etc. And again, perhaps for people who have a truly toxic family, the solution that works best for them is to not be engaged with that family. But in general, we hopefully most of us don't coexist with toxic families. And the reality is most of us exist with people in our lives who we love dearly, but who sometimes we struggle with. And so remind yourself about all the things that you love about the people you're with, even the people you struggle with. Remind yourself about how you care about people. And I'd say, sometimes maybe we fall a little short of love, but I think we still truly care about the people that are in our lives. Even if it's not our choice, even if it's the father of our partner or something like that, and we really struggle with that person. We care about that person. And we care about that person if for no other reason, from purely selfish because our partner cares about that person. And if our partner cares about that person and I support that, then I'm taking care of myself. Again, we can be a little bit selfish about these things if necessary, and it can work for us. Take a deep breath. Again, I use that in the title, and I just think that taking a deep breath, taking as many deep breaths as you need to over the course of the day is just really helpful. Lots of evidence to support that that kind of deep breathing as a method of relaxation really brings with it so many benefits. And so I do that, and don't just inhale and then not exhale. Sometimes I do that in a difficult situation. Breathe in, and then I steel myself up. I guess I'm giving myself extra oxygen for this difficult situation. Make sure you're fully oxygenated. Breathe in, breathe out. And again, do that. And you'll find if you all, for this moment, just in the safety of your own little silent boxes, take a deep breath and breathe it out. Breathe in again and breathe it out. You'll find that you feel much more relaxed. And hopefully you've all been feeling really relaxed anyway, but you'll find that it really has a calming effect on you. I think that in moments when you anticipate this has been fine. We've been here 3 hours and we haven't had that classic fight that we typically have yet. But here we go. Someone has just talked about the election. Good time to take the deep breath. Just have that clarity of thought that comes with it. Do what you can to avoid the known landmines. Again, don't go overboard. I'm someone who can I know where the landmines are. I'm pretty good at stepping around them. And I'm pretty good at kind of just nailing shut doors where I know there's a landmine. That's not healthy. But do what you can. If you know that you're on the other side of the political fence, there's no point in saying, right before Thanksgiving meal, right before the family expression of gratitude, prayer, whatever it is. Hey, what'd you think about the election? Knowing that, the other person might have a different perspective than yours. No one likes a sore winner, even more so than we don't like a sore loser. To be honest, I don't do this, but it occurred to me, have safe words or phrases with your partner. And this is, for these sorts of events, to think about the fact that you might need to be rescued a little bit. And that if you can come up with something and something like, honey, did you lock the back door? As a way of, and of course you did, because you always do, right? Sometimes I'm forgetful, but to know that this is a phrase and it's saying, help me in this situation, help come diffuse it, is just something that isn't a bad idea. Remember, you're here with your partner, you're here with your family, the people that you brought into this situation, not brought into the world, but this situation. And be a team, be people who can be there for each other and help people through these difficult kind of moments. So again, if you find that there's a hidden landmine, like you've avoided all the known landmines, but all of a sudden here it is and it blows up, take that deep breath and think about that active listening technique. If your child as the elder statesman that I've become. If your child wants to talk about things that happened 35 years ago that frankly you can't even remember, it's still important to have that conversation. And it's important to hear that child's perspective. It's important to hear that sibling's perspective. It's important to, wherever it is. And if I can come from a place not of defending things that I can't even remember, but of seeking to know, remembering that this is someone I love, and it sounds like this person is coming from a place of hurt. And yes, it's covered by anger, but it's coming from a place of hurt. That if I use the active listening that I was talking about prior, that we might be in a better place and we might resolve these issues. And just remember to keep breathing. I think in general, and some great supervisors in my life have said, when all else fails, just keep breathing. So know that sometimes we're going to struggle with some of these sorts of issues, and we're not always going to get it completely correct. So I actually, in kind of preparing for this, I came up with a number of interesting kind of resources. So, and most of these are in some way APA affiliated, but I found some interesting things to learn more about active listening, to learn more about deep breathing, to learn more about the importance of gratitude. That all those things are things that we can one, learn more about and explore a little bit more. I also found an interesting kind of site of, and this was, I think it's designed as part of a parenting blog related to Psychology Today, the magazine for lay consumption of psychology, I think, put out by APA. And it was designed, I think, recognizing that in a smaller celebration, that the usual, my family, for example, goes around and says what we're grateful for. We do have a prayer, and then we say what we're grateful for. And all the grown children groan a little bit, and yet say it, and all their partners, they're all married at this point, but it's always we're gonna have to go through this long thing. If you want to eat any turkey, you're gonna have to do this. And so it's something we do. So it's not, apparently we're not the only people who do this, because this writer was saying, in a group of 4 now, it's gonna take much less time. Now, again, my kids would say that wouldn't be a problem if it took less time. But had like 21 questions to ask, to explore, more deeply explore the meaning of Thanksgiving, addressing issues related to all sorts of issues related to celebrating or not celebrating Thanksgiving, of how to make this time meaningful. And then finally, I found Psych Central is not necessarily an APA website, but it's a fairly useful site, kind of written by an individual. And so this particular one has, it's sort of like coping strategies on steroids a little bit. So I'm going to stop my screen share, and hopefully there's a question or two, and hopefully a question or two that I feel like I can answer.
Excellent. David, thank you so much. That was great. A lot of great information, and I know a topic that's, as you said, it's on a lot of our minds as Thanksgiving is around the corner. Okay, so let's talk about some of the questions that came up. One that kind of emerged as a theme. In fact, we have like 2 or 3 questions on this. Was related to, I'll just pick one of them, and then you'll get the gist of it. What suggestions do you have when a family member is persistent in having a conversation that only brings tension and most likely will result in an argument?
I think perhaps I would take it a step back from there and recognize, again, part of me wants to say, well, what sort of family members? So I guess I'm coming from, and it might be different than this, but if this is with a partner, then again, I'm back to that sense of shared commitment, sense of, and I feel like I have to have a conversation prior to the conversation so that we can recognize that we really want to work towards seeking to better understand each other and work towards seeking to resolve issues in a way that's constructive and helpful. I guess, and doing those things ahead of time increases our ability, hopefully, to then have that difficult conversation that only repeatedly brings tension in a way that is more useful. I do recognize, again, that a lot of what I'm saying is all well and good, but much more challenging and, in fact, next to impossible if the other person is not committed to the same sort of thing. So, one, recognizing that this is something that is only, well, I'm not going to say easily resolved, but more resolvable if we're both committed to resolving it. But I also think that active listening in general can be really helpful. And again, so if I'm more interested in understanding why is it that that person always comes from this place of this is going to lead to this argument, what's going on for that person underneath? That's not an easy, you can't just ask, so what's really going on for you? But really kind of seeking to try and understand from their perspective what it is, what's that ancient hurt, what's that unheard person who only knows how to get their need met if they're screaming, and starting there by just listening and asking questions to open up without an interest in we're gonna have this fight and I gotta win. Again, I think that's a big part of it. That would be my beginning. So
no, that's a great point, and you're right. That empathy piece is so important. But I think, and it was reflected in a couple of the questions, it's harder to find that when it's a family member who maybe we don't feel as close to, or it's or they're more distant than ones we have more regular investments in.
And again, I don't always love this about me, and I'm not sure everyone loves it about me, but there are some arguments that are just not worth having for me. So if I don't see someone very often, and I know that we disagree about something, I tend to just kind of demur a little bit, and that's without saying, well, we'll just agree to disagree or things like that. And again, I recognize that sometimes I really feel really passionate about something, and I'm willing to fight to the death about something. But unless I'm, as I've often said to people, mostly my kids, I think, unless I'm really ready to kill somebody, I probably shouldn't be pulling out the knives and chains. I want to seek to defuse situations rather than add fire to or fuel to the fire.
Great. That's great advice. Thank you. One of the other questions that came up, you talked a bit about, active listening and the importance of that. And someone asked, it sounds like active dialogue takes a lot of patience and some detachment from emotions. And I don't know how to remove the emotions from my interactions or my response.
I think so. One, I don't think we learn these things quickly. And I do recognize that it'd be easy if we truly could just detach. But I got to be honest and say that I don't. I think that's important to kind of take it down a couple notches. And I think it's important to be able to kind of think with or listen with a third ear or kind of be able to, I often say to my grad students, be able to be outside my body and watch this interaction going on at the same time. And that takes some time and some ability, but I don't think it's useful or healthy to detach from our emotions. So it's again, I think the deep breathing, the active listening, the having a different intentionality of, I want to better understand this conflict rather than I want to play my part in this family script that we have. Again, whether it's 60 years in the making or the last 2 times that I've met this person that we've had this ongoing conflict with each other, that it's a different goal. And the goal, again, I think most often, if you've had an ongoing challenge with Thanksgiving, I'm hopeful that all of you can move it in a more constructive way by Thursday. But I'm not suggesting just do these two things. I'm looking at my resources, just do active listening and deep breathing, and you're going to be fine. It's going to go fine, and it's going to, but I'm hopeful that if this is someone you see on a regular basis, Thanksgiving, the next set of holidays, 4th of July, whenever, that if you keep on this path, that there'll come a time, a year from now, 2 years from now, 20 years from now. I'm hopeful that some of my issues will be resolved with my family members in 20 years when I'm still seeing them. That things will get better. I also think, again, if you can just remember this sense of shared commitment, the sense of caring, the sense of love that you have with people, that even when they don't get better, that this is just a small piece of what it is. But I do agree that the more distant they are, the less likely I see them, the more that this might be the thing that I remember most of all, because I don't have many positive experiences with them. But we also need to just be able to kind of put that's that person. That's that's part of my life. It builds character in me by having this ongoing relationship with that person on an occasional basis. That's not going to be much fun.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Something that struck me as you were saying, an earlier part of that response was this idea that a lot of these, as you refer to them as scripts, right? So a lot of these dynamics are a long time in the making. And so it makes sense then that, you talked about practicing and doing it over time, that they would take time to kind of deconstruct.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well put.
Okay. Another question in a little different vein. What suggestion can you offer for a family who is dealing with the loss of their matriarch and having to both handle the heavy emotions of the void and figuring out how to move forward to create new normal traditions during this holiday season?
I'm sorry to hear of your loss, first of all, from personal perspective. And unfortunately, that is a place that sooner or later, each of us will find ourselves in a similar sort of situation. I think, for me, the issues of, again, just staying focused on this one, but I think it works for a lot of the holidays that are coming up, is a place of gratitude is also, it's a place of memory. It's a place of being able to be mindful and remembering the importance of this individual. We lost my mom 20 years ago, and I still find myself getting emotional thinking about it. But so, I think that remembering all the wonderful traditions that person created and deciding how you're going to honor their memory by choosing to be together. I know that my mother lost her parents pretty early, and she and her siblings, most of which were sisters, chose to make sure that they continued to be together for the holidays, even though they had lost their central characters in their family. For many of us, I think finding what it is you do and kind of perpetuating that is, I think, really helpful. And then finally speaking to it with others in your family, speaking, if necessary, speaking to professionals to help you kind of work through that. But also maybe, especially in that first time, having a moment where, you talk about the importance of that matriarch as you gather together for this meal. And again, if you can keep the theme and remember to being grateful for all you learned, all the wonderful things that I've learned from my mom, and all the things that having a mom who was a mixed bag at times, that all the things that I learned that I appreciate about myself that came from my challenges and struggles with her are also important to remember. But so I hope that that's helpful. And it certainly hits close to home for me, again, 20 years later. So.
That's really thoughtful. Thank you, David. Okay, we have a few minutes left. I do have one remaining question, and we probably have time to sneak in another if somebody sends it through, but we'll go to this last one for now. assuming that some level of tension is unavoidable at times at holiday events, do you have any tips or guidance for helping to protect children from being exposed to those family tensions?
That's actually a very thoughtful question. And I guess my thoughts, I think one, you have to decide, what is it you're trying to accomplish, and that there are times perhaps when things are particularly toxic that maybe you make decisions to do things in a different way, and perhaps don't celebrate because you're so concerned. But I think more often we have tensions with people, and I think that just being mindful of my part of this and the ways that I contribute to this potential family tension are that my thinking about the sort of model that I want to be for my children, and the ways in which when I return fire, basically, that I'm also increasing the likelihood of basically having my children see something that I really don't want them to see. Family tension, but I frankly don't want them to see me being the sort of person I become when I continue this argument. I think those are important things to take into account. I just think in general, and then I think having a conversation, having an open and honest conversation at a developmentally appropriate level with the children to kind of debrief after this, it can be helpful. I think that it's really important. It's how we help our children recognize there is tension in families. It's normative. There are disagreements around people who care about each other. That's okay. But sometimes, yes, this maybe went a little too far. And maybe it's most important for if I mess up, if I'm the person who somehow is either initiating this tension or is to have conversations about that. I think those things are helpful for us to protect, but also more importantly, to help our children grow, to do conflict more constructively.
That's great. That's really great. David, I want to thank you so much for taking time today to share with us your expertise and your thoughtful guidance around managing holiday tensions. There was a lot of really good information in there, and I know the folks who signed on and listened to this will benefit from that. So my sincere thanks for taking time today to share all that with us.
Thank you. I appreciate this time, and I appreciate and nice to see people's names, people I haven't seen. So it's nice. Appreciate the offer and the invitation to do this.
Absolutely. I want to extend my thanks as well to all of you who joined us and participated in today's webinar hosted by the Institute for Child Development and Family Relations at California State University, San Bernardino. We've been providing guidance for parents and families based on science and best practice since 2002. Have a wonderful day and be well, and a happy holiday season to you all.
Happy holidays, everybody.